The night sky over the Russian heartland erupts in a fireball so massive it can be seen from space. A thunderous explosion, not on the front lines, but hundreds of miles deep inside Putin's fortress Russia. This is not a drill. This is not a special effect. This is the sound of the rules of war being rewritten in a single fiery instant. A Ukrainian drone, a symbol of defiance, has just reached out its long arm and struck a devastating blow to the very core of the Kremlin's war machine. The target? The Saratov Oil Refinery, a giant industrial complex that feeds the Russian military's insatiable thirst for fuel. Tonight we are witnessing a new chapter in this conflict, a chapter where nowhere is safe and no target is out of reach. The game has changed forever. Let's break down exactly what happened on that fateful night of October 16th, 2025. Under the cover of darkness, the armed forces of Ukraine launched a meticulously planned and audacious attack. Their long-range capabilities, once a subject of speculation, are now a terrifying reality for the Russian command. The Saratov Oil Refinery, a behemoth that processes a staggering 4.8 million tons of oil every single year, was slammed with precision. Multiple explosions tore through the facility, triggering an inferno that raged for hours, lighting up the surrounding area with an apocalyptic glow. This was not a random hit. This was a surgical strike aimed at a critical juncture in Russia's military supply chain, and Ukraine is not hiding. They are proud of this operation. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine openly and officially claimed responsibility for this bold move. Their statement was crystal clear. The goal was to undermine key elements of Russia's military-industrial base and, crucially, to reduce its ability to supply its armed forces with fuel. Think about that. This is a declaration of a new strategy, a move from pure defense to strategic offense. They are going after the lifelines that keep the Russian army moving. But the real story, the detail that should send shivers down the spine of every Russian military planner, is the location. The Saratov region is not in some border zone. It is deep within the Russian Federation, a place that was supposed to be a safe haven, far from the reach of Ukrainian weapons. This single fact transforms this attack from a tactical success into a strategic earthquake. Of course, Russian authorities had to say something. They confirmed explosions and a fire at the oil refining facility. Their Ministry of Defense scrambled to claim that their air defense systems had been active, allegedly intercepting drones over the region. But let's be brutally honest here. Their claims of interception ring hollow when the target is visibly burning, when the world can see the billowing black smoke and the charred infrastructure. The damage was done. The message was delivered. The Saratov refinery was no ordinary factory. It was a powerhouse, churning out more than 20 different types of vital petroleum products. We're talking about gasoline, diesel fuel, fuel oil, bitumen, and vacuum gas oil. More importantly, as Ukrainian sources have consistently highlighted, this plant was directly involved in supplying the Russian armed forces with the fuel and lubricants they need to wage their brutal war. This was a legitimate and high-value military target. And who delivered this masterstroke? Reports point to the elite units of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, working in concert with other defense components. This wasn't a lucky shot. It was a complex, high-stakes operation requiring immense planning, courage, and technological skill. It demonstrates a level of capability and daring that many in the West doubted Ukraine possessed. On the ground, the scene was one of chaos and destruction. Explosions were followed by a massive fire, with the exact scale of the damage still being assessed. But one thing is certain, the operation was a spectacular success. It proves that Ukraine can now project power deep into Russian territory, striking at the economic and logistical nerves that power the invasion. The front line just became the entire map of Russia. Let's be absolutely clear about what we are witnessing. This is not a minor tactical victory. This is not a simple drone strike on a random target. This is a fundamental tectonic shift in the very nature of this war. The attack on the Saratov Oil Refinery is a declaration, a statement of intent from Kyiv that echoes far beyond the immediate flames and smoke. For years, the conflict has been framed as a grinding war of attrition, a brutal slog in the mud of the Donbass, a battle over inches of territory along a static front line. But that narrative is now obsolete. Ukraine has just torn up the old rulebook and written a new one in fire, hundreds of miles behind what was once considered a safe zone. This is a move from a defensive crouch to a strategic offensive stance. It's a transition from simply trying to stop the Russian advance to actively dismantling the machinery that makes that advance possible. Think about the sheer audacity of this operation. The Saratov region is not a border area. It's deep in the Russian heartland, a place where the war was supposed to be a distant news story, not a raging inferno in your backyard. By reaching out and striking here, Ukraine has done more than just damage a factory. It has shattered a core psychological premise of the Kremlin's propaganda. The premise that the Russian homeland is an inviolable sanctuary, immune to the consequences of the Kremlin's aggression. That premise is now a pile of ashes in Saratov. The front line is no longer a defined geographical feature on a map. The front line is now every single piece of critical infrastructure that fuels the Russian war machine, no matter where it is located. This redefines the entire concept of battlefield geography. It forces the Russian military and political command to look inward to defend a perimeter that now encompasses the entirety of their own territory. The strain this places on their air defenses, their logistics, their morale is immeasurable. The strategic implications are staggering. This is a direct application application of a doctrine aimed at systemic disruption. Ukraine is no longer just fighting Russian soldiers, it is fighting the Russian military-industrial complex itself. The goal is explicit: to cripple key elements that allow the war to continue. And what is more key than fuel, fuel is the lifeblood of a modern army. It is the single most critical logistical commodity. Without it, the most advanced T-90 tank is nothing more than a very expensive static metal coffin. Without a steady, reliable flow of aviation fuel, the Russian Air Force loses its potency, its ability to provide close air support, its capacity for intimidation. Without diesel, the logistical trucks that bring ammunition, food, and reinforcements to the front lines simply stop moving. This strike on Saratov is not about winning a single battle. It's about winning the war by inducing a slow, painful paralysis across the entire Russian military organism. It's about creating a cascading series of failures that starts at a refinery and ends with a Russian battalion stranded and unsupplied on some Ukrainian battlefield. Now let's talk about the economic earthquake. The Saratov plant wasn't just some small-time operation. We are talking about a behemoth that processed nearly 5 million tons of oil annually. That's a significant chunk of Russia's refining capacity. Taking this facility offline, even for a few weeks, sends a shockwave through the entire Russian economic system. First, the domestic market. Russia is a vast country with a massive appetite for its own refined products. A sudden drop in the production of gasoline, diesel, and fuel oil will inevitably lead to shortages. We are likely to see immediate price spikes at the pump for ordinary Russians. We could see rationing in affected regions. The cost of transporting goods across the country will soar, feeding inflation and causing further economic pain for a population that has already been told to tighten its belt for the sake of the special military operation. This brings the war home to the Russian people in the most tangible way possible, through their wallets and their daily commute. But the damage doesn't stop at Russia's borders. This is a massive blow to Russia's export revenues. A significant portion of the products from Saratov were destined for the international market. Every barrel of diesel that isn't produced is a barrel that can't be sold for precious foreign currency. The Kremlin relies on these energy exports to fill its state coffers, to fund its war machine, to stabilize its economy under the weight of international sanctions. By attacking this refinery, Ukraine is directly attacking the financial pipeline that keeps Putin's regime afloat. It's a brilliant and brutal piece of economic warfare. It complements the sanctions regime imposed by the West, acting as a force multiplier. While Western sanctions try to block the sale of Russian energy, Ukrainian drones are now destroying the very facilities that produce it. The synergy is devastating. It forces the Kremlin to make impossible choices, divert fuel from the civilian economy to the military, exacerbating domestic discontent, or prioritize the home front and risk leaving its armies in Ukraine starved of supplies. It's a lose-lose situation manufactured by a single perfectly executed strike. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. For the Russian people, this is a profound and terrifying wake-up call. The comfortable illusion of distance from the war, carefully maintained by state media, has been vaporized. The war is no longer over there. It is in Saratov. It is in the smoke they can see on their social media feeds, in the worried whispers of their neighbors. It creates a deep-seated anxiety, a feeling of vulnerability that the Kremlin cannot easily erase. For the Ukrainian people, this is an immense surge of morale and national pride. It is a testament to the skill, courage, and technological prowess of their armed forces. It proves that they are not just victims, but active agents of their own destiny, capable of delivering decisive blows against a much larger foe. It reinforces their belief in victory, not just as a hope, but as an achievable military objective. Now let's shift our gaze to the global chessboard. What does this mean for the corridors of power in Washington, Brussels, and other NATO capitals? Behind the official statements of neither confirming nor commenting on Ukrainian operations, there is undoubtedly a sense of grim vindication. The West has invested tens of billions of dollars in military aid for Ukraine. This strike is a powerful, tangible demonstration of a high return on that investment. It shows that Ukraine can not only absorb advanced technology, but can deploy it with stunning effectiveness to achieve strategic outcomes. It validates the policy of supporting Ukraine as a means to degrade Russian military power without direct confrontation. In many ways, this is the ideal scenario for NATO, a severely weakened Russian military achieved by a proxy force with zero allied casualties. However, this satisfaction is tempered by a deep and palpable anxiety. The elephant in the room is escalation. The Kremlin has just been humiliated on the world stage. A core tenet of its power, the inviolability of the motherland, has been publicly violated. How will a regime built on a cult of strength and impunity respond? The fear in Western capitals is that a cornered Putin is a dangerous Putin. Could this provoke a more drastic response? We are already hearing ominous, unsourced rhetoric from Russian propagandists on state television about the legitimacy of striking Western decision-making centers. Could we see retaliatory attacks on the logistics hubs in Poland and Romania that funnel Western weapons into Ukraine? Such a move would be a catastrophic escalation, potentially dragging NATO into a direct conflict. Or will the response be even more brutal attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, a desperate attempt to terrorize the population into submission? The West is now holding its breath, analyzing every signal, every troop movement, every cryptic statement from the Kremlin, trying to gauge the temperature of a wounded and unpredictable bear. The stakes were already at a historic high. high, they have now been elevated to a terrifying new level where miscalculation could have consequences far beyond the borders of Ukraine. This single attack in Saratov has not just changed the war, it has heightened the global tension to a fever pitch. Let's dive into the gritty details of this operation because the devil, and in this case the genius, is in the details. How did they actually pull this off? We're talking about striking a heavily defended target over a vast distance deep inside a country that has invested billions in its air defense networks. This wasn't a lucky shot, this was a masterpiece of modern asymmetric warfare. The reports pointing to Ukrainian Special Operations Forces are key. This suggests a multi-layered complex operation. It's likely not just about launching a drone from a field. We could be looking with advanced intelligence gathering, possibly from partisans on the ground providing real-time data. We could be looking at sophisticated electronic warfare support, jamming Russian radar in the critical moments of the approach. This was a symphony of military disciplines coming together in perfect harmony, with the drone strike as the devastating crescendo. The technological leap here is staggering. The sheer range required to hit Saratov points to a homegrown Ukrainian drone industry that has evolved at a breathtaking pace. We've moved far beyond the makeshift commercial drones used in the early days of the war. These are likely long-endurance unmanned aerial vehicles capable of carrying a significant payload, navigating pre-programmed routes, and potentially even evading detection by flying low or using stealth-like materials. This isn't just a weapon, it's a statement of technological sovereignty. Ukraine is demonstrating that it can develop and deploy its own strategic weapon systems, reducing its reliance on the West for every single capability. This should be a massive wake-up call for military analysts in Moscow and frankly around the world. The era where only superpowers could project power deep behind enemy lines is officially over. Now, let's talk about the Russian response, or rather the glaring inadequacy of it. The Russian Ministry of Defense claims it intercepted drones, but the result on the ground, a massive fire and significant damage, tells a very different story. This exposes a critical vulnerability in Russia's much-vaunted air defense umbrella. It appears to be full of holes. The systems designed to protect the Russian heartland, like the Panzer S-1 or the S-300, S-400 batteries, were either caught off guard, overwhelmed, or simply outmaneuvered. This failure is catastrophic for Russian military prestige. It begs the question, if they cannot defend a critical oil refinery in Saratov, what can they defend? Can they defend the strategic air bases near Moscow? Can they defend the Kremlin itself? The psychological impact on the Russian military command must be one of sheer panic. They are now faced with the impossible task of defending an enormous territory against a threat that is cheap, abundant, and increasingly sophisticated. The cost of trying to protect every single potential target from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean is financially and logistically ruinous. This attack also forces us to re-examine the entire Western approach to military aid. For a long time, there has been a debate, often held behind closed doors, about the red lines. What weapons are too provocative? How far should Ukraine be allowed to strike? This strike from Ukraine makes that debate seem almost quaint. Ukraine has just demonstrated that it doesn't necessarily need F-16 fighter jets or ATACMS missiles with a 300-kilometer range to achieve strategic effects. They are building their own deep strike capability. This shifts the dynamic with its Western partners. It gives Kyiv more agency, more bargaining power. The conversation is no longer just about what the West is willing to give. It's about how the West can support and amplify an indigenous Ukrainian capability that is already proving devastatingly effective. We might see a new phase of cooperation, focusing on providing components, advanced guidance systems, and satellite intelligence to make these Ukrainian-made systems even more accurate and deadly. But let's not forget the human element in all this. For the engineers, the technicians, the soldiers who planned and executed this mission, this is a moment of immense pride and vindication. They are the underdogs who have spent years building, testing, and innovating under extreme pressure, often with limited resources. Their success is a testament to Ukrainian ingenuity and resilience. It's a story of a nation that has been forced to become a laboratory for modern warfare, and in doing so is rewriting the rules. For the workers at the Saratov Refinery and for the residents of the surrounding area, this is a terrifying introduction to a war they thought was far away. The sudden explosion, the sirens, the fear, this is the reality that Ukrainians in cities like Kharkiv and Odessa have been living with for years. The attack, in a cruel twist, creates a grim symmetry of suffering, bringing a small taste of the terror of war to the aggressor's doorstep. The international reaction, beyond the official government statements, will be closely watched. On the global markets, oil and gas traders are already scrambling. The price of Brent crude and refined products like diesel is likely to see volatility. The attack introduces a new risk premium, the fear that further strikes on Russian energy infrastructure could tighten global supplies. For countries like China and India, which have become major buyers of discounted Russian oil, this is a stark reminder of the fragility of that supply. Their cheap energy comes with a new kind of risk, the risk of it going up in flames. This might force them to reconsider their energy security calculations. For Europe, which has weaned itself off Russian pipeline gas but still imports some refined products, products, this is a mixed bag. While it weakens Russia's war chest, it could also contribute to energy price instability. The attack in Saratov proves once again that in our interconnected world, a fire at a single refinery can send shockwaves across the global economy, affecting prices and security from Beijing to Berlin. The world is holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering which critical Russian asset might be next on Ukraine's list. So where do we stand after the smoke clears over Saratov? Let's cut to the chase and lay out the brutal, undeniable truth of what this all means. This is not just another battle report, this is a fundamental reset of the entire conflict. The Ukrainian strike on the Saratov refinery is a point of no return. It marks the moment the war evolved from a regional struggle over territory into a full-spectrum confrontation that strikes at the economic and psychological core of the Russian state. The old rules are dead. The concept of sanctuary is gone. The battlefield is now limitless. For Ukraine, this is the ultimate validation of this strategy of proactive defense. They are no longer waiting for the next Russian offensive in a muddy trench. They are taking the fight directly to the source of their enemy's power. This success grants them immense strategic leverage. It proves their capability to shape the course of the war on their own terms, with their own ingenuity. The message to its citizens and its soldiers is clear. We are not just surviving, we are winning. We can hit them where it hurts the most. The message to its Western allies is equally powerful. Your investment is paying off in ways you might not have even imagined. Support us and we will deliver tangible strategic results that weaken Russia for decades to come. For the Kremlin and for Vladimir Putin personally, this is an unmitigated political and military disaster. It exposes a fatal weakness for the entire world to see. The emperor has no clothes. Their air defenses are porous. Their strategic depth is penetrable. Their military-industrial complex is vulnerable. This single event undermines the central pillars of Putin's power, the perception of strength, control, and invincibility. He now faces an impossible dilemma. He can double down, lash out with even greater brutality against Ukrainian cities, but that risks further alienating the international community and has diminishing returns. He can try to fortify the entire country, but that is a financial and logistical black hole that will drain resources from the front lines. There are no good options. The facade of the mighty Russian bear has been cracked, and the world can see the desperation behind it. For the United States and for NATO, the equation has become simultaneously simpler and far more dangerous. The strategic benefit is clear. A key adversary is being systematically weakened by a proxy force. Ukraine is demonstrating that with the right tools, it can degrade the Russian military machine more effectively than any sanction ever could. This is a compelling argument for continuing and even escalating the provision of intelligence, components, and advanced weapons. The goal of a strategically defeated Russia, long a dream in some Western capitals, now seems like a plausible, achievable outcome. However, this success comes with a terrifying caveat. The escalation risk is now at its highest point since the beginning of the invasion. A humiliated and cornered Kremlin is the most unpredictable kind. The red lines are blurring. The West must now navigate this new reality with extreme caution, balancing the desire for a Ukrainian victory with the existential fear of a wider war. The coming days and weeks will be a critical test of diplomatic nerves and strategic foresight. In the final analysis, the burning wreckage of the Saratov refinery is more than just a destroyed factory. It is a symbol. It is a symbol of Ukrainian resilience and innovation triumphing over brute force. It is a symbol of Russian vulnerability and imperial overstretch. And it is a symbol of a world where the balance of power is being violently recalibrated. This attack proves that determination and smart technology can punch far above their weight. It proves that the foundations of authoritarian power built on fear and lies can be shaken to their core. The war is far from over, but a new phase has decisively begun. A phase where Ukraine holds the initiative, where Russia is on the defensive, scrambling to protect its own heartland, and where the world watches, knowing that the fallout from this fiery night in Saratov will reshape global security for a generation. The shockwave is just beginning to spread.